Max. I grew up, well, let me backtrack a little bit. I came to Canada back in 1999, so it's been about 20 something years. I grew up in Scarborough, Ontario. During the day, I'm a chartered accountant, and on my spare time, I spend a lot of time volunteering in the Scarborough neighborhood that I grew up in, and I look forward to this discussion. Yeah, so I think what Tesha said here was very, very telling, and I want to sort of base mine on that microaggression type of racism that's going on. My experience with racism, the first time I really realized it was when I entered business school, coming out of high school. And my high school was very diverse, very tolerant of different cultures. And when I got to business school, I thought that it would be no different. But what I didn't realize was that in business school, the people that come from a broader group of people. And within that, everybody has different pulls and levers that are behind them. And so quickly, by my third year, as I was going through it, I realized that the people of color in the school were having trouble finding and landing those top-notch jobs. But the other folks who often do not participate in clubs, do not follow the checklist of things you should be doing as a student, were getting those jobs and were being able to land them with much ease. And having gone through that process myself, now looking back, I realized that there was so much racism at play, both within the school and within the companies that were hiring. One thing that I noticed, through my 4 years there, was that every company, to a certain extent, always had a quota of sorts, whether it was firm or not, or very variable. There was a quota of certain people that they want to hire from certain groups, and I had to compete with the folks who were Asian, who were Chinese/East Asian, because that's where I visibly belonged. And in order for me to break into a company, that was the quota I had to fit myself in, and that came at a cost of me pushing out other Asians, one other Asian from the spot. I only realized that once I started getting into recruiting, which was on the other side of it, and I started to see these things in action. So I think and I think we'll get to this at a later point in the discussion, but in terms of what we need to do, one of those things that we need to talk about, the implicit racism that goes on behind the scenes and the gateways of the companies in which people are working for. Doesn't matter if it's private sector or public sector, and how we can enforce controls within them to make sure that doesn't happen. I think the way that we see our parents go through racism has an impact on the various decisions that we end up making for the rest of our lives, right? So it's economic decisions. What type of careers do we pursue? Often immigrants pursue the law, health, or finance sort of perspective, or the way down, for their career, and that's a product of maybe our parents not having stable careers, and them wanting us to have it, but also we wanting to have it because we don't want to see their situation replicated again. And then also it influences their identity when they do enter the workforce. I think for a lot of immigrant children, it's not common to move out once you get a job, at the age of 18 or at the age of 22, or any other age until you're married. But that's often a piece that immigrant children are not able to bring up in the workplace because a lot of other people don't recognize that. So having to pick and choose between what you can share and what you can't, and being this semi-cloaked person in the workplace is also something that you sort of backpack as an immigrant or an immigrant's child who faced a lot of racism. So that's a loaded question. First of all, that is a question that remains unanswered, despite the millions of people in this country, in the States, and across Europe trying to figure that out. How do we beat racism in a westernized society? I think for me, I think the answer is two parts. So one, and not to blame the people of color in any way, but we need to hold ourselves to a higher standard. When we present ourselves in the workplaces that we survive in the communities that we do. We need to constantly be mindful. Are we benchmarking ourselves to other people of color, or should we be, and are we benchmarking ourselves to everybody? Because we need to first believe that we have that power and the ability already to be where we are. So don't walk around feeling that you're any less entitled to anything that everybody else has, whether that is running for politics, or whether that's being a business owner. There are no jobs out there that shouldn't be available to every one of us. I think secondly, when we do make it to the places that we are in, for instance, in the workplace, you want to constantly assert yourself in different roles that people may not believe you're apt to do, because only in that way will you be able to take a stand for the other people of color that come after you. So, for instance, in my workplace, I try to participate in committees and different working groups to make sure that to almost for myself, but also to make sure that they realize that people of color are not just quiet workers who will come in for the 9 to 5 and go home. When the Black Lives Matter movement came about back in May, I had sent a very long email to my CEO asking him to create a committee and a council to do something. And I made sure that, as they were pondering that, and as he was pondering that I was going to be part of that council going forward. And I knew that in their minds, creating an anti-racism council will be something that only the senior managers and management will be part of. But it's important for people like us to be in that group, guiding those discussions, because a council without visible representation from people of color might as well not be a council, especially when it comes to issues like racism. So I sort of want to hit up on the last point around, how do you become more comfortable when you're encountering racism, and then it will go into the school issue. So I think it's definitely fair, when you've been marginalized by the system and your workplace and your schools, for you to be afraid to speak up. It completely makes a lot of sense. I think for those who don't want to be vocal about it, who don't want to speak up right when it happens, is to find a mentor, find other people of color in the organizations of schools that you attend, and share those experiences with them in a language which both parties may understand, because more than likely than not, all the people of color in a certain place have been through something similar, and we are never the only ones on the receiving end of racism, because racism is not unique to one of us. So being able to find those mentors, and then once you start connecting and communicating with one another, you'll find opportunities to then do something with it, whether it's a collective pitch to the school administration or to upper management, like, hey, this is a problem here, we all sign it, all these people of color sign it, and you need to do something about it. So similarly, that would extend to schools. One thing that I think might come out of this this recent awakening of racial tensions in our countries, in the US and Canada, is the need for race-based student councils and race-based parent councils in schools. Because we know that there are student councils and school councils, but those are run by parents who have the time, who have the money and the resources to actually attend these meetings at 5 p.m. on a Thursday night. And immigrant parents do not have that privilege, and immigrant children do not have that privilege to also support that. So if we want to do something concrete about racism, then we need to petition the school principals where we see this happening and say, we need a race-based parent council, where the parents are the parents of people of color or the students of color, and then they put together their thoughts and their concrete feedback, and then hold these principals and trustees to account to do something. Because I think going in and trying to get school councils to change is probably not going to happen in the short term without, messaging being washed out. So yeah, it's probably like we need to start our own councils to address these issues.
Thank you.
My message would be to, if you see a problem with racism in your community, or school or neighborhood, don't be hesitant to rally up some folks and make it an issue. I think up until probably this May, talking about racism was like a taboo topic. It was a topic that people might shield you for being too vocal about it and might judge you. But the dynamic and the landscape has changed, and I think in their current month and year and going forward, you can never be penalized for talking about racism, because everyone is aware of the issue. So if you see it, just do something about it. You will be protected. If you're not protected by the people around you, then certainly by the broader society and social media. They will be there to back you up, and you will get the justice that you fought for.